Student environmental activists recently spoke to the press about their efforts to incorporate climate justice into the state's educational curriculum.
A lot of us have had experiences with teachers who denied climate change or have experiences with the lack of education, and we really wanted to see this in our schools. So to start, we researched a lot of bills and looked at and drew inspiration from similar ones, and then began writing our bill with the help of a lot of other people.
It concerned me that I really didn't know anything about this topic. The only really resource that I had was Google, and essentially everything that I know today was things that I self-studied from resources that I could only find on the internet. Essentially, the purpose of this bill and this legislation is to provide easy and accessible information to students across Minnesota.
One of the goals of this education plan is to ensure that academic standards address the needs of the workforce, are inclusive of ethnic studies, and are reflective of students of color and Indigenous students. And our bill makes sure that students are equipped with a deep understanding of climate change.
Climate justice is a framework that puts people first and views the effects of climate change as interconnected with systemic forms of oppression, and connects the effects of climate change with social and economic justice issues. So it centers people who have been systemically oppressed. By teaching climate justice, students will learn about the systems of oppression like racism and how they interact with climate change.
Senator Lindsey Port is the Senate sponsor of legislation to establish a model curriculum for teaching environmental justice, and I spoke with her this week. You are author of a bill that would require school districts and charter schools to provide climate justice instruction. What does that mean?
Hi, Shannon. Thanks for having me. It's nice to see you again. This bill means that it would be added to a core part of the curriculum, actually through all sorts of different subjects, from elementary all the way through high school, to start discussing the impacts that climate change, pollution, and the choices we've made as society, how those have disparate impacts across our communities.
The bill says requiring that schools provide this instruction. So if passed, this is a practical question, would the curriculum be mandatory? And if so, what about teacher training? And would colleges need to incorporate these ideas into their teacher training programs?
Yeah, so these are really important questions, and they're conversations we're still having. We're working with education associations, with teachers, with folks who write curriculum to really understand how this would be implemented. And that's an ongoing process that we'll continue to do, both us on the legislative side, also the students that we're working with, and the experts in this field. It does mean that we are multiple conversations away from the right answer or the perfect answer on this. But the idea is that, yes, it would be just melded into the current curriculum, because we already teach on sort of all of these things, and just adding an additional way that we talk about it.
The idea for this bill was brought to you by a group of youth environmental activists. Obviously, it's good for young people to get civically involved and to learn about the process in a real world kind of way. But historically, young people's voices rarely gain any traction. Why should lawmakers listen?
Yeah, it's an important question. And I think this bill is really a great representation of that. We should be listening because we are handing these students their future planet. We are handing them their future society. They have a vital role in what will happen as future generations move forward. They are a part of this, and they have an absolute right and responsibility, really, to make sure that they are well prepared for that future. And that is really what this legislation is about. They saw in their own education a lack of information that they needed. And that was what this bill grew out of. And it's our responsibility as legislators to take that seriously. It's easy to think, well, they're not voters. They're not going to vote for me. I have to worry about what my voters think. But they will be voting for us, for folks who, are walking down that path. But more importantly, they're the ones most affected by the curriculum in our education systems, and they're the ones who know sort of what they are missing out on, what the pieces are that aren't enough, that they need more of to be well prepared for their own futures.
This is a very broad subject, incorporating clean energy, pollution regulation, historic and institutional racism, climate change, and economic inequity, from what I've been able to piece together. And frankly, it's hard for me to figure out the intersection of all of these issues. Is this really more aspirational than practical?
No, I don't think so. I think the reality is that those sorts of things that you just listed, they impact our lives every day. They impact our communities every day. And just because it's hard, as I completely agree it is, this bill will be challenging. Having those sorts of conversations around difficult issues is challenging, but that doesn't mean that we should shy away from it. And our students are telling us that they need those conversations, that they are ready for them, and that they know that they are important as they grow into adults. And so I think, will this, adding this sort of curriculum, having these sorts of conversations, training teachers to have these conversations, will that be a challenge? Absolutely. Does it mean we shouldn't do it? Absolutely not. We owe it to our students to provide them with the information that they need to become, the active, engaged community members that they want to be.
I think some people might argue that this is more of a philosophical point of view, or a lens to understand the world, how all of these things intersect, and then how it would be taught in terms of reading, writing, and arithmetic, what kids really go to school for. But there is some strong disagreement on some of these issues. So if some schools incorporate a curriculum like this, say voluntarily, other schools stick with what is a traditional, educational model, what does it mean for our society then if we have sort of two different types of education, two different learning experiences for our kids?
Yeah, I think that's a really dangerous proposition, because we already see how sort of polarized and siloed off we are, how easy it is to stay in sort of your own community bubble and not experience the lives of other communities and how they've interacted with them. That's why these students were really clear that this should be mandatorily built into the statewide curriculum. This should be a part of it. And while we can talk about some things that there are disagreement about, it is true that communities of color are dying and being affected by decisions we've made at a higher rate than white counterparts. It is true that we built I-94 directly through a Black community that split it and made it more prone to the pollution from that area. It is true that there is an incinerator built in North Minneapolis in a predominantly Black community, and that they suffer from higher rates of asthma because of it. Those are true things that we can't pretend are controversial. They're hard conversations to have, but they're not controversial. And we have to, be honest with our students that this might lead to difficult political conversations. But the truth of it, the reality that some of our systems are set up to have harmful impacts on communities of color, is a reality, that if we want our students to be able to grow into adults who understand the realities of our communities, we have to be honest with them about those things.
My final question is that any teacher will tell you there's limited hours in the classroom and there's so much that kids need to learn. And would this curriculum replace some traditional aspect? And you've already said that it would be incorporated, but can you provide a couple different examples of how this could look?
Sure. Yeah. You know, when I've talked to the students about this bill and started having conversations with educators about it, a lot of educators have said they're already having some of these conversations and that they would appreciate guidance on how to have more of them. It does come up when they're talking about you know, redlining and things like that in history class and what that looks like. And then if you combine the idea of redlining and sort of packing communities of color into certain geographical areas, and then you add in the conversation of we built I-94 directly through that community where they were already packed and added a huge level of pollution to that community. That's just one way that comes in. You know, as we talk about climate change in science class and talk about, you know, endangered species and things like that. I still remember learning about the rainforests when I was in, you know, in junior high and needing to protect the rainforests and all of the things that we were losing because of them. Those conversations are still happening in different ways in science classes in elementary and junior high, and talking about the reality that those places, some of the places most hit, some of the places that will experience the first climate refugees in this world are communities of color. And what does that mean that we have intentionally sort of placed them there? Those are things, they're conversations that are already having or we're on the brink of having, and having guidance and requirement to have that whole conversation is really what the students are asking for. They want the full, well-rounded conversation, and they don't want to have to be the ones responsible for making sure that they get that conversation. They want it to be a required part of their education.
Senator Lindsey Port, I want to thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you so much, Shannon.